Hej och välkomna till Ntd Nyheter. Jag heter Dan Alfjorden. Här är våra rubriker. Undersökning. 20% av väljarna i USA som valde att poströsta 2020 erkänner bedrägeri. Trump slår larm om illegal invandring. Hunter Biden åtalad för 9 fall av skatteflykt. NBA-spelares skor bär bibelverser. I väst ser många på socialism och kommunism som separata. I själva verket enligt marxist-leninistisk teori är socialismen kommunismens preliminära förstadium. En ny undersökning visar att 1 av 5 väljare begick någon form av valfusk 2020. Den tidigare president Donald Trump kommenterar detta och menar att det stödjer hans flera år gamla påstående om omfattande bedrägeri. Ntd's Arian Pastar talade med undersökningsföretaget.
En ny undersökning från Heartland Rasmussen visade att 21% av de väljare som poströstade erkände att de hade fyllt i en röstsedel för någon annan i presidentvalet 2020. 10% av alla tillfrågade sade sig känna någon som erkänt att han eller hon använt en poströst på ett bedrägligt sätt. Och 8% av troliga väljare sa sig ha blivit erbjudna betalning eller något annat för att rösta. Nästan hälften av alla röster 2020 skedde via poströstning, vilket är mer än någonsin tidigare i USAs historia.
Consider how close the 2020 election was. This is extremely troubling.
Jim Lakely är vice ordförande för Heartland Institute som genomförde undersökningen. Han sa att de förväntade sig att kanske 5% av de väljare som poströstat skulle erkänna någon form av valfusk och att de blev chockade när de såg att siffran var över 20%. Den tidigare presidenten Donald Trump kommenterade undersökningen på sociala medier och skrev att detta är årets största nyhet och att republikanerna måste göra någonting åt detta.
Now, Lakely told me that some states did actually have reasonable safety measures in place when it comes to mail-in voting, but that those were abandoned during the COVID pandemic. He also says that people are now being discouraged from talking about potential voter fraud in the 2020 election, but that Americans, including Democrats, have routinely questioned election results in the past. For example, when George Bush won against John Kerry, or Trump's 2016 win.
Yet suddenly, in 2020, when everybody can see with their own eyes that our election system has been thrown into complete chaos, that is the only election in which it is not proper to question whether the results are legitimate. There was no suppressing of those sorts of ideas and thoughts for every other presidential election since the year 2000.
Undersökningen genomfördes under den första veckan i december och omfattade över 1000 svaranden. Huvudsakligen lika delar republikaner, demokrater och väljare från tredje parti.
I Reno, Nevada jublade tusentals människor över den tidigare presidenten Donald Trumps inställning till invandring. Han varnade för att dolda hot infiltrerar USA. Han sa att det är mycket, mycket illa. Ntd's Arlene Richards har mer information om detta.
President Trump lovar att ta tillbaka USA.
Not one thing has gotten better under crooked Joe Biden.
I Nevada i söndags gick Trump till hårt angrepp mot president Bidens invandringspolitik.
You're also much safer when President Trump was in the White House. Drugs, criminals, gang members and terrorists are pouring into our country at record levels. We've never seen anything like it. They're taking over our cities.
Den tidigare presidenten nämnde problematiska situationer med illegala invandrare.
Just days ago we learned that an illegal alien wanted for murder in Mexico secretly violated our border and was discovered in Las Vegas. They believe he's killed 2 people.
Fokusering på invandringen sker när Biden-administrationen arbetar med kongressen för att förhandla fram ett avtal om gränssäkerhet. En övergång till en tuffare gränspolitik kan ge Biden fler moderata och oberoende röster i de allmänna valen. Trump sa till en rekordstor publik i Reno att det finns antydningar till ett dolt hot som infiltrerar Amerika.
You know, they're coming in 27,000 Chinese men aged 20 to 24, 25. No women, no older people, no younger people. About 20 to 24, 25 years old. The perfect age for an army.
Trump betonade sin avsikt att ta krafttag mot den illegala invandringen trots att han fick kritik för vissa av sina kommentarer. Som att säga till publiken i New Hampshire att illegal invandring, citat, förgiftar vårt lands blod. Biden-kampanjen sa i ett uttalande att Trump lät som Adolf Hitler som förespråkade rena tyska blodslinjer. Men Trumps förespråkare säger att frasen inte ska tas bokstavligt. Sedan 2016 har Trump reciterat en sång om en kvinna som räddar en giftig orm.
Take me in, O tender woman, take me in for heaven's sake. Take me in, O tender woman, cried the vicious snake.
The snake bites the woman after she rescues him. Trump presents the poem as a cautionary tale about harboring illegal immigrants. He told the Reno audience it's a metaphor of what's going on at your border, and it's a metaphor as to what will happen in Reno, in Nevada, and all over the place. Arlene Richards, Ntd News.
Hunter Biden står inför nya brottsanklagelser. Det är det andra åtalet som den särskilde utredaren David Weiss väckt mot presidentens son och hans långvariga DOJ-utredning. Weiss tillkännagav åtalet den 7 december där Hunter Biden anklagas för att ha underlåtit att betala över $1 miljon i skatt samtidigt som han istället spenderat miljoner på citat saker av personlig karaktär. Enligt åtalet ägde detta rum under en 4-årig plan för att stödja vad som kallas en överdådig livsstil.
En högre domstolsnämnd i Kalifornien väckte åtal på 9 punkter mot Hunter Biden den 7 december och anklagade honom för 3 grova skattebrott och 6 mindre skattebrott. Den särskilde utredaren David Weiss hävdar att den första presidentsonen spenderade miljoner på en överdådig livsstil och droger istället för att fullgöra sina skatteförpliktelser. Weiss säger att åtalet omfattar 3 fall av underlåtenhet att betala skatt för åren 2016, 2017 och 2019 och 3 fall av underlåtenhet att lämna in skattedeklarationer för åren 2017 och 2018. Utredarens team anklagar Hunter Biden för att ha deltagit i ett 4-årigt system för att undvika att betala skatt på minst $1,4 miljoner. Åklagarna hävdar att Hunter Biden inkluderade falska affärsavdrag när han lämnade in ansökan för 2018 efter att slutligen ha betalat för det året och hävdar att det skedde i syfte att undgå taxering och minska de betydande skatteskulder han stod inför. I det 56-sidiga åtalet fanns också anklagelser om att han skulle ha undergrävt löne- och skatteavdragsprocessen för sitt eget företag genom att ta ut miljontals dollar utanför den normala avräkningsprocessen. Den omtalade presidentsonen anklagas för att ha spenderat sina pengar under denna tid på droger, eskorter och flickvänner, lyxhotell, exotiska bilar och kläder, bland andra saker av personlig karaktär, kort sagt citat, allt utom sina skatter. Det framgår att han spenderade över $1,8 miljoner enbart under 2018. Han listade ungefär $770 000 i kontantuttag det året, tillsammans med över $380 000 i betalningar till kvinnor och nära $150 000 på kläder och accessoarer. I åtalet anges även utgifter för 2016, 2017 och 2019. Hunter Bidens advokat, Abby Lowell, uppgav på torsdagen, baserat på fakta och lagen, att åtal inte skulle ha väckts om hans klient hade haft något annat efternamn än Biden. Lowell anklagar Weiss för att efter påtryckningar från republikanerna ha brutit mot en tidigare uppgörelse och sedan att han lägger till 9 nya åtalspunkter efter en 5 år lång utredning. Om presidentens son fälls på samtliga åtalspunkter riskerar han ett maximalt fängelsestraff på 17 år. Justitiedepartementet har meddelat att utredningen pågår.
Efter att ha vunnit 8 matcher i rad träffade Ntd Orlando Magics Jonathan Isaac för att diskutera hans nya skokollektion, basketskor med bibelverser och mycket mer.
NBA-stjärnan Jonathan Isaac har släppt Judah One, en serie basketskor som har bibelverser tryckta på dem.
I wanted to be able to have my values represented in the marketplace, and so to be able to have God-honoring and Christ-honoring sneakers that people of like minds and like beliefs can be able to purchase and wear, athletes can purchase and wear them. I'm just super excited about it.
Isaac, som är en hängiven kristen, säger att samhället rör sig bort från gudomliga värderingar och principer. Han hoppas att hans skokollektion och hans klädkollektion Unitas kan förena människor kring traditionella värderingar. Skorna finns i flera olika färger med olika bibelverser på var och en av dem. Lion of Judah har Ordspråksboken 28:1. De onda flyr fast ingen jagar dem, men de rättfärdiga är orädda som ett lejon, en vers som Isaac bär med sig vart han än går. Triumfens kännetecken, andra Korinterbrevet 4:9, förföljda men inte övergivna, nedslagna men inte utslagna. En reflektion över hur Isaac själv har klarat sig igenom många svårigheter, inklusive all...
It's not something that I truly understood. And then after I got drafted, I met a man in an elevator, and he said to me, I can tell you how to be great. And I said, how? And he said, you have to know Jesus. And from that moment on, my life kind of just went on this crazy roller coaster ride of coming to true understanding of the love of Christ, that, you know, the love that God had for me.
Den mannen var pastor Jerome Hepburn, som senare blev Isaacs pastor. Hepburn uppmuntrade Isaac att starta skokollektionen Judas efter att Nike avslutat deras kontrakt. De hoppas att de till nästa sommar ska ha ett komplett sortiment av vardagliga fritidskläder.
Vi är strax tillbaka.
Den högsta konsten är vacker, häpnadsväckande, tidlös och berörande. Upplev konst med 5000 års historia. Inspirerad av det gudomliga. Upplev Gan Jing.
Runt om i världen och även i Europa och Nordamerika har samhällena blivit värdar för kommunistiska influenser utan att människor ens inser det. Under loppet av ett århundrade upprättade kommunismen massiva diktaturer i Sovjetunionen och Kina. Den orsakade mer än 100 miljoner onaturliga dödsfall. Den förslavade miljarder och den förde världen till randen av ett kärnvapenkrig och därmed förintelse. Vad är då kommunismens natur? Vad är dess mål? Varför ser den mänskligheten som sin fiende? Och hur kan vi undkomma den? Vi kommer att visa den andra delen av introduktionen till filmen Hur kommunismens spöke styr världen. Filmen är baserad på boken How the Spectre of Communism is Ruling Our World.
6. Socialism as the preliminary stage of communism. In the West, many look at socialism and communism separately, which provides fertile ground for socialism to flourish. In fact, according to marxist-leninist theory, socialism is simply communism's preliminary stage. In 1875, in Critique of the Gotha Program, Marx put forward the idea that there is an initial phase of communism, followed by an advanced phase. Compelled by changes in the international situation at the time, Friedrich Engels, in his later years, also proposed democratic socialism, in which votes were used to obtain political power. Democratic socialism was adopted by Social Democratic Party leaders and theorists of the Second International and led to the left-wing parties in many capitalist countries around the world today. Lenin set down clear definitions of socialism and communism. He considered socialism to be the preliminary phase of communism, and communism to be developed on the basis of socialism. Thus, it is clear that socialism has always been a part of Marxism and the international communist movement. The public ownership and planned economy of socialism is part of the initial preparation for communism. Presently, while branches of socialism or left-wing doctrines popular in the West seem superficially unrelated to communism, they're simply communism's non-violent forms. Instead of violent revolution, votes are used to gain power in the West. Instead of outright public ownership, high taxation in Western countries serves the same role. Instead of a state-planned economy, Western social welfare systems are used to eat away at capitalism. Left-wing parties in Western countries consider social security and welfare systems to be an important aspect of realizing socialism. When condemning the crimes of communism, the violence and slaughter should not be the only focus. Communism in its nonviolent forms has deceived and bewildered people's minds under the guise of various branches of socialism. Some socialist or welfare states in the West today use the idea of the Commonwealth to sacrifice individual freedoms. Citizens in these countries retain certain political freedoms because the brand of socialism there has yet to be well developed. Socialist countries set equality of outcome as the primary goal, and thus they are bound to deprive people of their freedom. If a free country turned into a totalitarian regime overnight, the drastic contrast between propaganda and reality would leave most people shocked. Many would rebel, or at least passively resist. This would lead to high costs for totalitarian rule, and the regime would likely need to commit mass slaughter to eliminate the resistance. This is one of the main reasons that both the Soviet Union and the People's Republic of China have engaged in the mass killing of their own citizens during peacetime. Unlike totalitarian regimes, socialism in democratic states slowly eats away at people's freedoms through legislation. Like the metaphor of the boiling frog, the process of establishing a socialist system takes decades or generations, leaving people gradually numb, oblivious, and accustomed to socialism, all of which enhance the deceit. The essence and objective of this type of gradual socialism are no different in substance from the violent form. Socialism uses the idea of guaranteeing equal rights through legislation, while in actuality, it drags down moral values and deprives people of the freedom to incline toward goodness. It's impossible to enforce equality by suddenly elevating those at lower levels, so instead, socialism artificially restrains those at higher levels. Especially in terms of moral values, the socialism of the West uses pretexts like anti-discrimination, value neutrality, or political correctness to attack basic moral discernment. This is equivalent to an attempt to eliminate morality as such. This has come along with the legalization and normalization of all manner of anti-theist and profane speech, sexual perversions, demonic art, pornography, gambling, and drug use. The result is a kind of reverse discrimination against those who believe in God and aspire to moral elevation, with the goal of marginalizing and eventually getting rid of them. Seven, the romanticization of communism. To this day, there are numerous Westerners who harbor romantic fantasies about communism. Yet they've never lived in a communist country and experienced the suffering there, so they have no understanding of what communism actually means in practice. During the Cold War, many intellectuals, artists, journalists, politicians, and young students from the free world went to Russia, China, or Cuba as tourists and travelers. What they saw, or rather were allowed to see, was completely different from the lived reality of the people in those countries. Communist countries have perfected their deception of foreigners. Everything the foreign visitors saw was carefully crafted for their tastes, including the model villages, factories, schools, hospitals, daycare centers, and prisons. The receptionists they encountered were members of the Communist Party or others considered politically reliable. The tours were rehearsed. The visitors were greeted with flowers, wine, dancing and singing, banquets, and smiling young children and officials. Then they were taken to see people hard at work, able to talk freely and as equals, students studying hard, and lovely weddings. What they didn't get to see were the show trials, mass sentencings, mob lynchings, struggle sessions, kidnappings, brainwashing, solitary confinement, forced labor camps, massacres, theft of land and property, famines, shortages of public services, lack of privacy, eavesdropping, surveillance, monitoring by neighbors and informants everywhere, brutal political struggles in the leadership, and extravagant luxuries of the elite. They especially weren't able to see the suffering of ordinary people. The visitors mistook what had been staged for them as the norm in a communist country. They then promoted communism in the West through books, articles, and speeches, and many of them didn't know they had been taken in. A small number did see cracks in the edifice, but many of them then fell into another trap. They saw themselves as, quote, fellow travelers, and adopted the Chinese attitude of, quote, not airing dirty laundry in front of outsiders. lacking the courage to tell the truth, they chose a shameful silence. Everyone is, quote, free and equal, where there is no oppression or expropriation, where there's great material abundance, where everyone gives according to their ability and receives according to their need, a heaven on earth, with every individual able to develop himself or herself freely. A human society of this sort exists only as fantasy, and that fantasy has been used as bait by the devil to deceive man. In reality, power falls in the hands of a small elite. Real communism is a totalitarian apparatus controlled by a small group who use their monopoly on power to suppress, enslave, and deprive the majority. Eight. The devil's destruction of culture and morality. Communism teaches people to oppose belief in God and to cast out the divine. It simultaneously launches attacks on religions from the outside while manipulating people to corrupt religion from the inside. Religions have been politicized, commercialized, and turned into entertainment. Numerous morally corrupt clergymen put forward fallacious interpretations of religious texts, misleading their followers and going so far as to commit adultery with their lay members or even pedophilia. This chaos has left sincere religious believers bewildered and deprived of hope. Just a century ago, an unwavering belief in God was a sign of moral decency. Now, religious believers are considered foolish and superstitious. They keep their beliefs to themselves, not even discussing their faith among friends for fear of being mocked. Another important goal of communism is the destruction of the family, using ideas like gender equality and, quote, sharing wealth and wife. The 20th century, in particular, was host to modern feminist movements that promoted sexual liberation, the blurring of gender differences, attacks against the so-called patriarchy, and weakening the role of the father in the family. They changed the definition of marriage, promoted the legalization and legitimization of homosexuality, promoted the rights to divorce and to abortion, and used social welfare policies to effectively encourage and subsidize single parenthood. All of this resulted in the collapse of families. This has been one of the more startling transformations of society over the last several decades. In the political sphere, communism exploited loopholes in the legal and political systems of democratic nations in an attempt to manipulate major political parties. For electoral victory, politicians resorted to dirty tricks and made promises that they could never fulfill. The result of the influence of communism is that political parties around the world are often somewhere on the left of the political spectrum, advocating higher taxes, higher social welfare expenditures, big government, and interventionism, all of which they seek to entrench in legislation. And with a left-leaning government, leftist ideology comes to infiltrate the entire society, backed up with the indoctrination of youth, who in turn come to elect more left-leaning candidates. The academy, which is supposed to play the role of transmitting the essence of the wisdom and culture of the ages, has also been subverted. In the first half of the 20th century, the communist specter arranged for the systematic destruction of the education system. China, famous for its profound ancient culture, was subjected to the New Culture movement even before the establishment of the Communist Party. This was part of the effort to disconnect the Chinese people from their traditions. After the communists seized power, they nationalized the education system and filled the textbooks with party ideology, transforming generations of young Chinese into ferocious, quote, wolf cubs. In the West, the specter launched the progressive education movement, using the banner of science and progress in order to gain control of philosophy, psychology, pedagogy, and eventually the entire academy, and thus brainwash teachers and education administrators. High school education began excluding orthodox ideas and traditional morality. Academic standards were lowered to make students less literate and math savvy, and less able to form their own judgments and use common sense. Atheism, the theory of evolution, materialism, and the philosophy of struggle were all instilled in students. Following the counterculture of the 1960s, advocates of political correctness have become thought police, forcing teachers to indoctrinate students with all manner of twisted ideas. Students now graduate from school without a strong moral compass, with no foundation in their own culture, lacking common sense and a sense of responsibility, and are left to blindly follow the crowd, thus joining society's downward trend. Out in society, there is drug abuse, rising rates of crime, a media sphere full of sex and violence, an art world that treats grotesquerie as beauty, and all manner of evil cults and occult groups. Young people blindly adore film and television stars, waste their time on online games and social media, and end up dispirited and demoralized. The senseless violence of terrorism against innocents violates all moral parameters established by tradition and makes people worry desperately about the security of the world and what the future holds. Nine. Return to God, restore tradition, escape the devil's plan. Human civilization was transmitted to man by gods. Chinese civilization has seen the prosperity of the Han and Tang dynasties, and Western civilization reached its peak during the Renaissance. If human beings can maintain the civilization that gods gave to them, then when gods return, man will be able to maintain a connection with them and understand the law that they teach. If humans destroy their culture and tradition, and the morality of society collapses, then when gods return, people will fail to understand their divine teachings because their karma and sins are too great and their thinking has departed so far from the instructions of the divine. This is dangerous for mankind. Communism is a scourge of humanity. Its goal is the destruction of mankind, and its arrangements are meticulous and specific. The conspiracy has been so successful that it has almost been carried out to completion, and now the devil is ruling our world. The ancient wisdom of mankind tells us this: one righteous thought conquers 100 evils, and when a person's Buddha nature emerges, it shakes the world in 10 directions. The devil seems powerful, but it is nothing before God. If humans can maintain their sincerity, kindness, compassion, tolerance, and patience, they will be protected by God, and the devil will have no dominion over them. The mercy of the Creator is limitless, and every life has a chance to escape catastrophe. If humankind can restore tradition, elevate morality, and hear the compassionate call of the Creator and the heavenly law that provides salvation, man will be able to break through the devil's attempt at destruction, embark on the road to salvation, and move toward the future.
Detta var den andra delen av introduktionen till vår specialserie Hur kommunismens spöke styr världen. För att se hela delen, gå till Ntd Sveriges kanaler på YouTube, Facebook och Gan Jing World. Tack för att ni har tittat och vi önskar en god fortsättning på julen och ett gott nytt år.